Tinubu's disqualification and judgments Supreme Court will overturn to save Tinubu, which is an impossible task. As the presidential election petition tribunal progresses, Nigerians are already looking forward to know to how the judges will decide, not just at the tribunal level but also at the Supreme Court. Confidence is very, very low, and one can't blame people for feeling this way because based on recent rulings of the Supreme Court have turned logic and the law upside down. So, it's understandable that people lose confidence. Many people might be saying that all judges are the same. They have collected money, they have taken bribes, and believing that nothing will come out of it, that no one can remove a sitting president. These are just some of the many permutations and issues being discussed. Hear the news in details. If this is your first time of coming across the Future News, thank you for stopping by. Please subscribe, like, and share. However, in this very uh, news I want to give to you, I want to explain the greatest way that P2B is going to win this election following the 25% loss and win in Abuja. And case of reference is going to be Yaradua, the former president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, and Buhari, who are all the ex-presidents of Nigeria, and how this victory is going to submerge. However, when one looks at the gravity of what Tinubu has done and all the baggages that comes with him, along with the massive evidence presented in court, the judges at the Supreme Court will need to go to extreme levels in order to free Tinubu. There have been many judicial precedents that the Supreme Court justices have been a part of in the past few years. While the Supreme Court has the right to revisit a case or reverse their decision if they have new information, the question is, how many times will they do this in order to free Tinubu? If it's just one judgment that they need to reverse, people might think it's just a one-off and a public opinion might not be against them. However, when you consider that they would need to reverse multiple judgments, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or even 7, in order to free him, it becomes a matter of morality rather than just taking bribes or favoring someone. And it doesn't stop there. What about the implication of the judgment if they eventually overturn all past judgment in order to favor him? What would that mean for Nigeria going forward in terms of politics and governance? It will undoubtedly change the political landscape in Nigeria. For example, the Supreme Court judgment that made Lawan, who didn't contest for the senatorial primaries, to become the winner of the election. Before this judgment, it was possible for someone who didn't contest the election properly but won the primary election at the party level to become the winner of the election. That was how Wike became the governor of Rivers State. He won the PDP governorship primaries, but somehow INEC put Celestine Omehe's name on the ballot for general election, and the Supreme Court restored him. Many people hailed the Supreme Court for delivering justice in that case. However, why didn't many people hail the Supreme Court when they delivered judgment on Lawan's case and that of Agbabio? It shows that something was definitely wrong with those judgments.
Party, the APC, and for democracy.
Now, let's look at the first judgment that the Supreme Court justice would need to overturn in order to free Tinubu. In 2003, Buhari lost the presidential election to Obasanjo and went to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Eventually, the Supreme Court ruled that despite Obasanjo not winning Abuja, what was needed was for the candidate to score at least 25% of the total vote cast in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. It was the first judicial interpretation of the 25% requirement in Abuja since the Fourth Republic began. The Supreme Court interpreted it as a presidential candidate needing to score 25% in two-thirds of the state in Nigeria must still score 25% in Abuja. This was the interpretation. So, knowing fully well that Buhari was going to court to say that Obasanjo did not win Abuja is not in the constitution, that you don't need to win Abuja, but you must have 25% in Abuja before you can be granted the president of Nigeria, which Obasanjo had 25% in Abuja. The next judicial precedent that the Supreme Court justice would need to overturn was set back in 2008 in the case of Buhari versus Yar'Adua. Buhari sought the cancellation of the presidential election because Yar'Adua didn't win Abuja. However, the Supreme Court of Justice that sat on the panel disagreed with him. They followed the earlier precedent of 2003 and ruled in the same manner that 25% was only required in Abuja, not a win. Therefore, they struck off Buhari's petition. So based on the 25% requirement, the Supreme Court has already made two judgments stating that a presidential candidate must win 25% in Abuja before being declared a winner. And Tinubu obviously did not achieve this required percentage in the FCT. And since this section of the Constitution was not amended before the presidential election, it becomes a dead end for Tinubu. He cannot escape it. The Supreme Court has no option but to follow precedent by annulling his victory, regardless of how people feel about the 25% requirement in Abuja. It is still the law. It is still the law. So Tinubu did not win Abuja. He didn't score 25% in Abuja. So the law is the law and the law must be followed. And the law must be upheld. It is practically impossible for someone to have 25% in all the 36 states of the Federation without having it in Abuja. Abuja represents all Nigerians. So if you are already popular in some states in Nigeria, it means you are popular in Abuja as well. All past presidents, including MKO Abiola, scored the required 25% in Abuja. Therefore, the case of Tinubu will be indifferent. The third judgment that they will need to overturn was delivered in 2014. And as fate will have it, the current Chief Justice of Nigeria was part of the panel of judges that delivered the judgment in that groundbreaking case of Abacha versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The Supreme Court ruled that if a forfeiture is a result of a crime, there can be no forfeiture if there is no crime. If someone forfeits something, that means a crime was committed. Therefore, so this judgment, the judiciary precedent, will ensure that Tinubu is thus disqualified. Tinubu forfeited 460,000 US dollars to the United States government funds that were traced to narcotics trafficking. So the hands of the Supreme Court judges, including the Chief Justice, are tied. They cannot do otherwise but to disqualify Tinubu. The fourth judgment that they will need to overturn in order to save Tinubu is the one they delivered in 2017. Two Supreme Court justices who delivered the judgment are still serving at the Supreme Court. In the unanimous judgment, they disqualified the PDP candidate because he forged his certificate. Looking at the evidence that articles witness submitted at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, you will see that the Supreme Court justices have no option but to take a clue from the earlier judicial precedents they themselves set in 2017. Or will they treat Tinubu differently? The next case that ties the hands of the Supreme Court justice in the one that delivered in 2020, the judgment disqualified the real David Lacon because his deputy forged a certificate. The significant takeaway from that judgment is that the Supreme Court understood that time was of the essence. They disqualified him 24 hours before he was supposed to take the oath of office. They understood that politicians who didn't win election or violated some laws in the process shouldn't be allowed to enjoy the office even for a day. So it can be done even without amending relevant sections of the law. Election dispute can be resolved before swearing in. So only people who truly got the mandate of the people will be sworn into office. The next one is the one they delivered this year, Oyetola versus Adeleke. In that judgment, the Supreme Court upheld and reinforced all the guidelines and processes involved in the conduct of election. All those processes and guidelines were not obeyed by INEC during the election. They conducted the election without recourse to the guidelines. Thanks for supporting the Future News. See you next as we're going to be bringing you today's update. Remember, we're going to court today. Thank you for supporting the Future News. Peace.